Hey there folks, and welcome back to another Let's Talk About video where I discuss, analyze, and kind of sort of review games I've been playing. Today is a big day as the newest Pokemon games have finally been released, so we're going to be discussing that obviously. I want to preface this video by saying that I was kind of hoping for these games to fail and flop since I really hated Sword and Shield quite a lot, and I even started to play Temtem because I was hoping it would be the superior Pokemon game so that when Scarlet and Violet came out, I could come here and claim that y'all should play that instead. But that's not really the case, and I actually really enjoyed my playthrough through Scarlet. It's definitely not without its flaws for sure, and we'll discuss all the good and the bad. And I would like to say that I did play without a day one patch, so there will be a lot of complaints that I have that are just frame rate, performance, and bug related. And I assume these are mostly getting fixed for the normal audience as they play because I've seen the patch notes and most of the stuff's covered. But with that out of the way, let's just get started in discussing this with as little spoilers as possible. So the first topic I want to discuss in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet is the story, and I guess, the whole general playthrough is the story. Typical Pokemon games have the most cookie cutter story ever. You're a new trainer, you want to be a champion, team whatever gets in the way, you beat them, you beat the champion, you save the world, game over. And at this point, it's a big nothing burger since it's been the same story for 20 years, every Pokemon game is the same. But Pokemon Scarlet and Violet come and they finally shake that up. As they had advertised in the trailers, you don't really have a set path. You're kind of free to do whatever you want, and there are multiple different storylines that you can experience because you're essentially on summer break from school and you can do whatever you want. The first is our typical, Champion League thing where you have to collect all the badges and fight the Elite Four. The second is Team Star and stopping their not so evil plans, to be honest. And the last are the Titan Pokemon hunting, which is, fighting giant Pokemon, I guess. They all converge at the end, so you're going to want to do all three. But there is no scaling in this game, so you do want to go and do them all at the same time, unless you just want to steamroll the other ones after you finish one. Anyway, it's sort of cool that you do have the choice to do everything in whatever order you want, but I really want to hammer home the fact that the Titan questline is actually good. I don't want to do any spoilery stuff, but the actual writing, the dialogue, what's going on, actually hit me really hard, and I was enjoying the whole thing. So it might sound like whatever, but it's rare that I actually care about any story in any game, so Pokemon give me an actual enjoyable storyline is very surprising. The other two quest lines are whatever, so 1 out of 3 are good, but that's still more than I was expecting. So I know again it sounds like nothing, but trust me, I'm making this point for a reason. I don't want to spoil it, you're just gonna have to experience it, but it does have some decent writing and stuff. The second topic I want to talk about is the open world. One of the issues I've had in the past few Pokemon games is they've been so linear and you're basically railroaded the entire time, which is super boring. Scarlet and Violet have definitely flipped the 180 on that end, and even more than Arceus, because it's legit a fully open world. The entire world is accessible all the time. You aren't loaded into little maps from a hub like Arceus, so that's pretty cool. So obviously there are going to be a lot of little secret items and things to collect, and I find that's pretty cool because it's actually rewarding you for exploring, which is another thing that I was not really expecting because typically Pokemon games don't have much to explore. It's not just like item pickups either, because there's a vast array of Pokemon that can be found in certain areas and at certain times of day. So as you explore, try to reach high places and go into caves and do other stuff that's just off the beaten path, you tend to see significantly more Pokemon compared to just running the main road between little towns and Poke Centers, which feels like a no-brainer. But again, even Arceus had a very limited amount of Pokemon that you can actually find in the wild, and most sections of the map had the same Pokemon in them. Scarlet and Violet's regional dex is about 400 Pokemon, so there's double the amount of wild Pokemon you'll see by comparison, which is great because you end up seeing just a ton of different Pokemon. There's always something you see on the horizon, you're like, oh, I want that, let me go catch that one. And the actual Pokemon they have in this game are good. They have 400 Pokemon, but it's actually mostly good Pokemon. They don't have all the rodents and all the birds and all the little duplicate Pokemon. They actually have a really good roster here for this little regional dex. But sadly, the open world definitely comes with a lot of issues, and I would like to play most of this on Switch hardware, but we also know how these games get developed, so let's just talk about that really quick. Well, an open world Pokemon game is exactly what we've always wanted, and I'm glad we have adopted an Arceus Plus approach to the new generation of Pokemon games, but that does come at a cost. And again, I would like to blame it on the Switch hardware or just Pokemon being Pokemon, but whoever's to blame, it's going to sound like a broken record, so let's just rapid fire these complaints. Open world, but all the textures are just awful, so everything looks terrible. I mean, that was a no-brainer seeing that it's on the Switch, right? Pokemon games have not improved their environments in a decade, and the cutscenes were touched up and polished a bit, so they actually look good when they present them in trailers, but the actual day-to-day gameplay is awful to look at. The draw distance also just straight abysmal, so trying to find anything the secret items or other Pokemon is really frustrating because you can only load Pokemon and items out 30 feet, So when you're flying around, you can't see anything anyway. The camera and the controls for your Pokecycle can also be a headache, and that's really surprising because Arceus had a really great mobility options and not once had a complaint about the camera. But Scarlet and Violet is just awful and even buggy at times, so I hope they fix that in the Day 1 patch. Some of the terrestrialized dens and wild Pokemon also just fade out of existence when you get close. Another either visual or spawn bug, I don't really know, but it's really disappointing. Another weird issue I have with the open world is, it's gonna sound like an IGN complaint, I swear, but too many Pokemon, right? It's dumb, it's super dumb complaint. But Pokemon do tend to spawn in groups here, and it's meant so that you can use the new auto battler function to just collect materials faster, which is another interesting feature that I actually do quite enjoy since the combat animations can really just take forever sometimes. But what this does is actually just constantly spawn Pokemon around you that you really need to be careful navigating to avoid unless you want to just keep walking into Pokemon battles. And they made it so that all these Pokemon are scaled to be their actual size or close to it. So there's a ton of Pokemon that are like tiny little specks that you just keep bumping into, and it gets really annoying after a while because also all the Pokemon in a battle are going to be active around you. So once you're out of the battle, sometimes you'll just automatically start another battle because they were already touching you. It gets really, really annoying because there's always just a ton of Pokemon surrounding you since the game only spawns Pokemon in a 30-foot radius. There's not much we can do about it though, and I feel like if we were on better hardware and we can render out further away, it would help space Pokemon out better, but we are stuck on the Switch. So that was kind of a lot of complaints, but I do want to talk about some improvements Gamefreak has made to Pokemon that I really appreciate. So finally, they're updating the textures of Pokemon. Rather than just be solid colors and looking more and more cartoony, Gamefreak is actually giving Pokemon textures like scales or fur patterns and stuff like that to all the Pokemon, just to make them look a bit more natural, which I think is a great direction in my opinion. They didn't quite nail it here, it's kind of hit and miss. Some Pokemon look great, some look like beach towels, I don't know. I just know that I think this is a great direction to go, and maybe again, if the Switch hardware wasn't in the way, we could have gotten better. But I also just don't know how much effort really goes into cranking out a new Pokemon game every year, but still, this is a solid win for me. Another change that I appreciate, but I know others won't, is that they made TMs into limited use items again. Now, the reason why I like this change is for a few reasons. One is that there is no move tutor as far as I could tell. I looked and never saw one. So without a move tutor and limited TMs, you actually have to make choices about spending resources, and that gives them value. It's not like TMs are one and done though. There's not just one earthquake in the game. You can get more TMs from the TM machine at the Poke Centers, which require materials from Pokemon you fight, which is honestly a good system in general because it rewards using the new auto battler system whenever you can. So you can stock up parts to make TMs. It gives players something to grind for that really isn't RNG dependent. And it also is what holds up the exploration because TMs and items constantly spawn on the maps. So you're always picking up more TMs and such. They're not static fixed in the same spot kind of items. So you can find 14 Dragon Dance TMs around the world and they do respawn. And that is cool because it rewards all your exploration, which feels pretty good. And I can't believe I haven't discussed really battling yet, so let's cover that really quick. Since one of the main cons for Pokemon Open World was that the draw distance is incredibly small, it also has an added bonus here in battles. See, now when you battle, you aren't taken into some basic battle arena based on the type of environment you're in, but it's the actual area you were just with all the Pokemon and items loaded in, so they're just doing their thing. So you can kind of spin the camera around and sort of scout out the area while you battle, which seems dumb, but I thought it was actually a really cool touch to be honest. It's nice to battle exactly where you're at. It's one of those features like Arceus had that I really liked, and I'm glad to see Game Freak implement them into a mainline Pokemon game. Of course, this suit has its issues and bugs. Sometimes you just throw your Pokemon into the wall, or it's nowhere to be seen since the camera can be jank depending on where you're at, or you're not facing the right direction. There's definitely some technical issues with the implementation here, but I just still think it's a really cool system for the battles. The battle animations in general, though, are as bad as they've ever been. They haven't really improved those at all. I don't think we're going to see that for a while, to be honest. Maybe Gen 10, maybe Gen 11, who knows. I think it's really going to be up to the next console that Nintendo releases. Now, the new gimmick of the series, Terrestrializing, or however you want to say it, it's kind of weak in my opinion. Not stat-wise, but it feels like Dynamax with paint thrown on top. Because the way you do raid battles and such with these is literally the exact same thing as Dynamax. And like Dynamax, you get, one per battle, and it's just weird. I don't know. So how it works is basically that every Pokemon has another type in its summary page. That's your Terra type, which can be changed with in-game items, so don't worry about that. Now, when you go into this Terra type, you gain that as an extra offensive stab. So if you were Water and Grass type, and you had Fire or Terra type, all three of those types become stab. And if you have Terra type of the type you already had, let's say water, so we're water, grass, water, then water moves get an extra stab on top, so you get like double stab. Now when you terrestrialize, your defensive typing becomes just your Terra type. So if you were the water grass type with the water Terra type, you would turn to just water type, which is a good way to change up your offensive and defensive typing for Pokemon that have like some really poor types like rock and ground and ice dragon. That being said, I don't like the look of it. I don't like that every Pokemon gets its own weird typing hat, and I don't like what it means for competitive Pokemon, because basically every Pokemon could just be whatever type you want, and so every Pokemon will need to be managed as though it could be any type, which sounds awful, to be honest. Like, I'm not really enjoying the thought of that. I'm not super big into competitive right now, but I'm not looking forward to seeing this play out. I'm not a fan of this gimmick, to be honest, and I'm a little tired of every Pokemon game needing a new battle gimmick when Mega was already the best, and we should just go back to those. The last complaint I have is mostly just the Pokemon complaint, and it's that, again, all the animations are lifeless and stiff and awful, not just in battle animations, but like in general, the NPCs and stuff, and nothing has been done to improve the Pokemon, the NPC animations, or anything like that, which is why, for the most part, I feel like I'm not attached to anything, is it just feels so robotic. There are a few choice cutscenes where some animations look better than usual, which I really appreciate, but it just makes the rest of the game feel rushed or uncared for. And that's a real big issue with Pokemon since the jump to 3D, and I'm a little sad to see that it really hasn't improved even still. Also, there's no voice acting. Come on, just give us dialogue. It's not that hard. There's not a whole lot in this. Anyway, I've kind of rambled enough, so let me just close this whole thing with a big summary. Pokemon Scarlet and Violet have been a pleasant surprise. I was actually expecting another cookie cutter railroad Pokemon experience, but what we got was actually a nice update of features and a actually truly next-gen Pokemon game that I feel we should have gotten in Sword and Shield. Gamefreak did take a lot of good ideas that came from Arceus and implemented them into the mainline Pokemon games, which is cool. While there are a lot of technical issues that may or may not still persist after some patching, I think Generation 9 was a big step in the right direction for Pokemon as a whole. Some of the story was engaging and enjoyable, while some of the more basic Pokemon experiences like gym battles felt the same as they always have. My experiences with Scarlet have been mostly positive, and I've said outside of the technical issues, I don't really have any complaints about the game, besides the fact that I just don't like the Terrestrialized gimmick. So I feel like Pokemon's in like this metamorphosis stage right now, where the game is finally evolving, and we're in this like second stage. Maybe next generation polishes everything up, because I feel like the features we now have are amazing, they just need to be refined and like treated better. It's just a shame we have to wait even longer for this potential to be fully realized. So I don't really review games or give games number scores, but I do think this is a great Pokemon game comparatively to the more recent entries, so I do recommend picking it up if you have the time and the cash to spare. But that's basically all for me. Thank you all for watching, and thank you to my Patreon members. I love you guys. If anyone wants to talk shop, discuss whatever, or needs help, I'm always available in my Discord in the description. But that's all. Thanks. Peace.